In this tutorial we're going to learn how to make a trance stab sound via a series of layers. Now we've got a couple of presets that we've slightly tweaked and are going to add in at the end, but we're going to show you how to make the basic layered stab on a couple of different synths using a couple of different techniques. So we're going to start with the V station, and we'll just have a little listen and a playthrough of the chord progression and stab progression that we're going to be using. So to start off, we've just initialized a patch here. So we are going to take the first oscillator down an octave and just detune it by a couple of cents. Then the second one we're going to leave on a saw wave as well, leave it on the octave it's set at, and detune it in opposition by a couple of cents. I'm going to blend that oscillator in. Then the third oscillator we're going to stick up 2 octaves and transpose it by 7 semitones, so a fifth. And we're going to change that to a square wave, and we're going to change that square wave with this pulse width modulation here, and that should change it from a square to a more pulsy type waveform. I'm going to mix that in at about 25%, something like that. So let's have a little listen to that now. Also going to add in a touch of the noise oscillator as well. So next we'll move on to the filter. We're going to add a touch of resonance. Bring that up to just over a quarter of the way through. We're going to ramp up the overdrive quite significantly. It's just over half, maybe 2/3 of the way round. And then we're going to apply some positive modulation using the mod M for the filter. And we're going to push that up to about there, about halfway positive. And then we're going to change this modulation envelope for the filter. We're going to turn all of them off, and we're just going to use the sustain, and we'll turn that up to about 3/4 of the way round. Next we're going to change the amplitude ADSR and make it a bit more stabby. And to do that, we're going to turn the decay down to just over half, and then we're going to bring the sustain down as well to about 1/3 of the way, and then turn up the release to just a little bit over half, maybe 2/3 of the way up, and that gives us this tone. Then we're going to use a little bit of the onboard reverb, just again just under a quarter, and then we're going to have a little look at how to add some unison. So we're going to add 5 unison voices and turn the unison detune up quite a lot. I'm going to change it to poly 2 mode. So that's starting to sound much more trancey. So the next thing we're going to do is process the rest of it with some additional inserts. So we're going to use some more overdrive on here. Just going to beef up the level slightly because we haven't matched that, but it's also going to change and crunch up the tone. Then we're going to add in some stereo delays with very low in the mix, only a quarter of the way in the mix, quite a lot of feedback, and the delays have been essentially bandpass filtered by taking off some of the top and some of the lows. And then finally we're going to add in some reverb as well, some more reverb really I should say, to the signal chain. So I'm just going to play this through and turn the effects on. So that's already sounding much more trancey. Next we're going to have a look at how to create a stab sound in Massive to layer up with our V Station one. So here's just the built-in standard preset that comes up when you load up Massive. So first thing I'm going to do is turn on the amplitude of all the oscillators, and I'm going to select drive 3 for the first oscillator, change the wavetable position and detune this by -6 cents. Then for the second oscillator I'm going to take you up an octave and put you +9 cents, and I'm going to select square saw 2, the wavetable position all the way to the right. For oscillator 3 we're going to choose additive 3 and change the wavetable position all the way to the right again, and turn the amplitude up to about halfway. And for this oscillator we're going to tune it up by 2 octaves, then plus 7 semitones to put it up a fifth, so up to 31. And then I'm going to just ever so slightly detune that in cents, a couple as well. And then that gives us this timbre. Then I'm going to add in some bright noise and turn the colour all the way to the right and the amplitude up to about a quarter of the way. Now it's not very noticeable at the moment, but it will become more prominent once we start looking at how the oscillators are voiced. And turn the feedback up slightly as well. And then we'll have a little look at the amplitude envelope. So make it a very quick attack. Pull the decay time down a touch and the decay level down. And pull the sustain level down as well. And then increase the release time. To just make it slightly more percussive and more stab-esque. So then we're going to have a little look at doing some insert processing, and we're going to start by putting in the chorus ensemble, and we're going to turn that up to about a third of the way. Wet dry balance, we can turn the rate down, the offset down, and the depth down as well. Next we're going to add in a dimension expander, which is essentially a reverb. We're going to go to 50% wet dry, and then the size is going to be about 2/3. And then we're going to add in a little bit of high shelf EQ, and then a high mids boost as well by a tiny bit. And then finally we'll have a little look at the voicing. So we'll turn on unison mode up to 16 using a maximum of 32 voices. You can go higher, but it gets a bit CPU intensive. And then how these unison oscillators are detuned against one another can be controlled here at the unison spread part. So we're going to turn the pitch cutoff on, put the crossfader into the middle. We're going to change it from center to chord, and we're going to go from minus 15 cents to plus 15 cents. We don't want it really detuning any of the unison voices, detuning by any more than that. And we're going to control that amount of flexing between the two via an LFO. So if we just turn the amplitude off to start with, I'll turn the rate up. We'll play this back and then we'll dial up the amplitude to dial in that LFO control, see the difference it makes. So somewhere around there is pretty good. So for the moment, I think that's it for the massive patch. So let's have a listen to that blended with our V station stab. So there's those two working quite nicely together. And next we're going to create a stab on the ES2 synth. So again, we're starting off with just a very basic one oscillator waveform. Again, it's a saw as it was in the V station. So we're going to detune that by 4 cents and turn on the next oscillator. We're going to use this organ 3. If you right click on that bottom oscillator, there's actually 100 waveforms stored for oscillator 2 and oscillator 3, extra ones that you can get to. So we're going to transpose that up by an octave, so 12 semitones, and we'll tune that up by 4 cents as well. So we've got those working in opposition, slightly detuned against one another. And then finally we're going to take that third oscillator up. It's going to be a saw, and it's going to go up an octave plus an additional 7 semitones, so we'll take that up to 19. So again, another fifth detuned up above, and we're also going to put that onto plus 5 cents as well. And we're going to keep the mix relatively balanced between all three. We're going to blend the two filters, even though they're in series. We're going to blend the mix of those together. We're going to increase the resonance a touch, bring that up to about a third of the way round. We're going to push the drive on that one up to about halfway. I'm going to bring up the resonance of filter 2 as well, up to about half, a little bit under halfway as well. I'm going to turn off these modulation routings to the sound, and we'll just have a little listen to this at the mo. And now we're going to have a little look at the ADSR envelope for the amplitude, and pull the decay down to about 200 milliseconds, which is about a third of the way through on this slider. the sustain is between 0 and 1, so we're going to put that to about 50. It's about halfway. Although visually it looks a bit further than halfway across, but it is about 50 on the sustain. And next we'll have a look at the release, and we'll turn that up to about 350 milliseconds, so just over a third, or just under half actually, on that slider as well. But the millisecond counter is what is important particularly, and just to judge it by ear if your synth differs from that, because that's quite different. You can see that is supposed to be pretty much halfway, but to me that looks 2/3 of the way on the faders. So don't always trust what you can visually see for the ADSR, because it will depend entirely on what the parameters actually mean and what they are equivalent to. So let's have a listen and see how that has reshaped that sound. So just pulling that release time a little bit as well to make it a bit more percussive in nature. So that's sounding pretty good. And now we're going to copy this preset across onto another ES2 and just paste that a second. And we're really going to use this as like a fourth oscillator or a noise oscillator. So we can turn off oscillator 1 and 2 to start with, and then just switch the oscillator around to noise. And let's just have a listen. So we're just going to use that to support this main synth as if it was the fourth oscillator of the ES2. And when that's blended in relatively subtly, it really does add a lot of texture to the sound and to the timbre. So those two working together now are quite a strong unit with that sort of noise oscillator, essentially. The kind of view it as the fourth oscillator really for that particular sound. So we'll just blend these back in against the other ones that we've already made. See how they all stack up and sound together. So they're sounding pretty good, but we'll also add in a touch of delay and reverb as well. In fact, what we'll do is we'll copy that stereo delay preset and paste it onto our ES2. It's slightly altered. And we'll treat our noise in the same way, using the same copied presets across, but we're also going to filter out some of that bottom end. So obviously without this this high pass filter rather, we would actually see quite a lot of low frequency energy. So it's a good idea to get rid of that, because we don't really want that in the tone. It doesn't really contribute enough to the production technique, so we're just going to make sure there's none of that low energy interfering with the bass and the other synths. So let's hear all those together with all the effects now. So that's starting to really work well. Now we've bussed all of those tracks already to this output here. And we're just going to do some additional processing with the rest of the tracks, the drums and the bass in mind as well. So a bit of housekeeping here with some high pass filtering up to 200 Hz. Going to run that delay again, so I'll paste that preset since it's slightly changed, which will actually sort of double up on the delays from most of the channels, but the massive synth hasn't been delayed. So delays and reverb in trance, doubling and tripling up on those things isn't necessarily a bad thing in reality. So let's have a listen to that. So that's starting to sound very, very trancey. And because of some of the transients and the percussive nature has been lost a little bit with the delays and the reverb, we're going to add in a transient designer to the bus, and we're just going to make those attacks pop out a little bit more and add some gain to the attack phase and pull out some of the sustains and the decays as well a little bit and pull them down just by 10% there. But we're really going to increase that attack phase for that first 40 milliseconds or so by about 50%, so this will make a real difference. So it just adds a little bit of percussive bite back into the mix. And then we're going to use some sidechain compression as well, driven by the multi-band sidechain compressor from Vengeance. And we're not going to duck it all out entirely. We're only going to duck out about 30% to start with. We've sort of reshaped that sidechain compression envelope as well, sort of make it pump quite nicely with the kick. So that's starting to sound really nice together. But we're just going to add in another couple of Blue Peter type presets that have already been made up and created. Just some extra stab layers in here. And we'll just listen to that bus together. And this time we'll listen to the full version.